I am. Today, 17 years ago, Lila'Angelique, as a young lady coming out of school or in school or not knowing where she wanted to go, encountered me in the Angel Tunnel in Central Park, New York City, and recognized my voice as a countertenor. When she did, I recognized her as an intelligent young lady, and from that point on, we have stayed together. It is now 17 years since then. We live in Bali. We are creative artists, and we continue to create no matter what happens. If the volcano were to erupt, we would create. If people were to riot, we would create. If the world would explode, we would create. Creation is life. Life is creation. Making one's life a creative work of art is the lifestyle that one can follow as a human being. All the other things that one does are all about ego and about gaining something, or getting something over on somebody, or controlling something, or manipulating something. Whereas the artist, or the creative artist, or the being who lives their life in creativity only does so because for that reason alone. There is no other reason. There is no reason after that. There is after a painting to sell that painting to another. That is sales. That is not creativity. One can be creative in that sales process, but it's the intent that is important. In sales, the intent is to move this device to another person. It is not to do so without any expectant, without any desire for reward, without any acquisition of money, without even the completion of the project itself. It is the doing that is the most important part of it. I create, I live to create, and I am a creative artist because of that. To sell those things, or to project those things, or to stand in a social environment and convince others to listen or to buy is not my work. It is a work that is marred by malintent, because the intent does not necessarily match the act. If I try to sell a piece of music to somebody, to an organization, or I convince an agent to sell, I am, through an ego intent, trying to gain something through that process. I am trying to sell something. I am trying to move this material device over to another person. That process is marred by morality, or a moral hypocrisy. It's difficult to know what one is doing. What are you doing when you sell your piece of art to somebody? What are you doing if you convince somebody to buy your album? What are you doing if you, in dancing, tell somebody to watch you or to film you? What are you doing if you write a piece of a story and you try to convince a magazine to publish that story, the art, the creative act is the only thing that, and the process of it is the purest way of living life. It is and can be identified as the living as a God or the Christ self. In doing so, one stays completely free of moral interactions. One never presses upon another person something that could be destructive. An example, for instance, Michael Jackson made a whole lot of music. Some of it is really lovely. During my time in the Angel Tunnel, where I was doing my performance, where I was barely asking people for money, but I did. I don't now. Where I was expressing myself in my fullness, where I was in a place where people passed by, whether they wanted to or not, whether they did or didn't stop, was not my issue. I was doing my work. I was being my creative self fully. The intent was to do so and to be there in that full presence and to do that full process. Right beside me in the area, in the wings I called them, further over, where the stairs came down to meet the angel, there were people who would do what they called break dancing. And what they would do is gather people to collect money from them. That was their only purpose. They were not being creators. They were not being artists. And I defy you or any person who would be perceiving this to argue that point with me. They were only there to make money. If nobody was there, if nobody was coming by, they would not do that. However, in comparison to myself, I did what I did when nobody was there, when nobody was passing by, when it was freezing, up to the point at which I could play. And even maybe sometimes I couldn't, and I would have to go home because my hands and my body were too cold to do so. Whereas these beings only did it to take their little basket and walk around the crowd and tell them that they should give them a $20 bill or something. Whatever. They had a little spiel that they would do. And then, or before that, or in the meantime, they would do a flip. They would get on, maybe they would get on each other's shoulders and flip off and land on the ground. Maybe they would do some breakdancing, maybe. But mostly they just talked about giving them money because they were so good at what they did. One of the things that they used to help them gather people and give them money was Michael Jackson's music. Michael Jackson sold that music. He gave it to an agent. His name, I am forgetting his person, his big dude who used Michael Jackson quite well. He sold his CDs, he sold them to record labels. The record labels sold them to everybody. They became trendy, they became famous. Everybody listened to them. He became the king of pop. And so these break dancers used his music to gather an audience, and they would turn it so loud that it would drown my own thoughts out. In my stillness, in my meditation, it would drown me out. What were they doing? What was I doing? What was happening there was oppression and destruction through the use of somebody and somebody's music that was created purely, but was sold impurely, because by selling it, it got into the hands of people who used it to sell their own thing, to manifest a impure and very violent behavior. because they stole money from people. They begged money from people. They extracted money from people by using Michael Jackson's music. That's very tricky. It wasn't Michael Jackson's intent to do so when he recorded that music. He recorded it. What happened was there's a breakdown that occurs between a creative act and the sales of that thing or material that has come from that creative act. For the artist to indulge in that sales or that propulsion of that creative act to others, that is where the mistake arises. That is where Yeshua made his mistake, because he was turned into Jesus, which is a curse word. That is where almost all the creative artists make a mistake, because they start selling, they start moving their pure creative masterpiece out into the world because they want to have their ego assuaged. They want people to tell them how great they are. They want others to say, "You are so great." Van Gogh did not experience that, but now people sell his work for millions of dollars. What is that about? Is that just irony because he did not make any money from that? It is a mystery. But as a creative artist, the whole duty, the whole importance of being a creative artist is to create. There is nothing else. There is no sales. There is no standing in front of somebody and telling them that you are a creative artist. However, if somebody through love understands that creative act and then sells it, then it is their moral responsibility. It is taken off the creative artist. It is taken upon the salesperson. It is taken upon this, I call that a barker, let us say, a person who stands somewhere and says, "This is great." You have circus barkers, you have barkers at events, you have big posters that plaster everywhere and say, "This is great. I do yoga. I am this enlightened being from whom you can learn and to be an enlightened being." All of that is, and all of its intent is for acquisition and material wealth. It is not for what it says it is. It is a lie. The only way that anything can move around the universe is through love, and anything else, any intent to acquire or to manipulate something through acquisition, manipulation, control, is a moral problem. It's difficult. I am. This is my statement of truth. I am a fully activated creative artist.